Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of What the Ref, our attempt at demystifying the world's favourite research excellence framework. I'm Gemma.
And I'm James.
And I'm Simon.
And today we're going to start with going through the headlines. Simon, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, well, there were two incredibly well-written articles in Research Professional over the last month. One of them written by us, along with Lizzie
Yay!
and the other one written by one of our colleagues, Simon Kerridge. Both of them looking at the CQU guidance, that's the Contribution to Knowledge and Understanding, and talking about some of the issues that we talked about in the last podcast about how which people are eligible. Vague guidelines are a problem there. So alongside those incredible articles, there was also there's a really interesting article in the Times Higher written by Jack Grove, which looks again at this issue of portability and says that the REF are carrying on despite the outcry against it. So it sounds very much like the REF are keen for the portability criteria to make it through to the actual REF. I don't know if we have any ideas about that, or is that for a later episode?
They've been outcrying portability and maintaining portability through REF 2014 and 2021, and they capitulated to demands in 2014 and 2021 to keep portability. I guess this time they said they'll try something different, which I guess is the whole spirit of REF 2029.
I guess we've got an interview coming up later that's, partly about REF being a lever for institutional change. And I guess what we know is that whichever way around you do it, there are perverse incentives.
But I think also, can I just say, portability is linked to career progression and the ability to move around the market as an employee or a potential employee. And it's particularly important to early career researchers. And I just want to say this so that we're not accused of overlooking them. And portability is very important to them. And now in this situation, looking towards 2021, the university market is in a totally different situation to it was in 2014 or 2021. Even despite the pandemic in 2021, there are no jobs available. It'll be interesting in a later episode to delve in what those consequences might be specifically in this context and this time of the portability rules and the insistence of REF England that they will not allow portability for REF 2029.
It's worth noting as well as a final point that there is an exception in there. It's for long form and long process outputs, whatever that might mean. So I guess one of the things we're going to be seeking clarification on is, what does long process mean?
But if anybody knows, please put it in the chat down below. What is a long process, a long form output? And give us examples too, because we're all...
Well, we know what a long form output is. That's been defined in the past, right? That's a thing that we know exists in the relation to kind of open access requirements. But long process is new.
Long form processes. I mean, I've worked in academia for a long time. I could list thousands of them of what I think takes too long, but I don't think that's exactly what the REF are going for. But let's not get into this subject too much, because there's another really interesting update as well, and that's that the REF team ran a town hall on the Contribution to Knowledge and Understanding guidance, which I'm sure everybody wanted to see because there was so much controversy. I think it's really interesting that we talk about words like capitulation and outcry so far already on the news, and here we are once again talking about something that's highly political. For me, the major thing about that town hall, and we'll put the link into the description of this podcast, is that Jonathan Petrowski and Rebecca Emmett, who are both policy team, Jonathan Petrowski is the head of policy of REF policy. They came to the issue around role descriptors and who's allowed to submit outputs to the REF. And they gave a clarification. Now, we talked about this in the last podcast, that the way that the guidance had been written, that some universities were trying to cut out, well, maybe not trying to cut out, but were going to prevent certain roles from contributing. And can I just read that clarification? Because I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, please do.
He said, I think there's been some misinterpretations or perhaps a lack of clarity from us, meaning the REF, around the intent. Really, the policy intent in REF 2029 is to recognise the contributions of everyone who enables research and to extend the boundaries of authorship beyond those in traditional research roles. The term research activity is intended to encompass the wide range of research-enabling professions that contribute to UK research. And then he goes on to talk about technicians, research managers, Later on, he talks about software professionals, research software engineers. That's the name. But still, it's good to see them all included, and hopefully this will move us somewhere closer to universities actually starting to submit outputs from these roles. What do you think? Will it be enough?
No, because with all due respect to the Research England team and the REF team, who I know work really, really hard on trying to encourage, universities to do this, they still frame it as a choice. And so the question is not whether the rules allow it or not, but whether universities will choose to select them and include them in REF submissions at all. And it's very difficult. As we will explore in future podcasts, it's very difficult to prove that sustainable link for research for these people. That's an incredible amount of extra work. So I'm really great that Research England has put that out there. I'm skeptical as to whether universities will embrace or engage or enable this selection of a wider diversity of staff without clear links to a competitive advantage. James?
And yet, for the second time, I'll mention we have an interview coming up where we could see culture change happening in an institution that might suggest this could be a direction of travel some places are going to take.
Yeah, so I think it's showing that Research England believe in this concept of broadening the people who can contribute to research and who should share in its success. And yeah, there's going to be some issues and hurdles as we get the guidance sort of tightened up to the point where the HEI start following it as we would like to see it. But I think it shows that the REF team want this, Research England want this. It's just a case of convincing universities that the right thing to do. Maybe that'll take some time. So
I don't think universities are going to do it because it's the right thing to do. I think universities are going to do it because it's going to lead to some sort of advantage. Sorry, I'm very skeptical of this, and perhaps this is different. We can explore it. But the other, big change that was made in REF 2021 was the idea that, only outputs that were eligible, I guess, but even traditionally submitted outputs, which is the majority, would be selected for REF and could be included to REF if they are open access. And that was a mandated change. If you wanted this publication included in REF, it needed to be open access. And people change really, really quickly. But if you frame it as a choice, if you'd frame it as, yes, we're going to encourage it and to enable universities to make this choice, it's not the same as a mandate. So I'm skeptical to see whether we'll see the same amount of change.
Can I make one final point on that about open access? Because I think it's a useful kind of counterpoint, which is that, well, not counterpoint, but like point of reflection, which is the purpose of the open access mandate was partly about making research accessible, but it was also about changing research culture towards being more open and towards that open research culture, right? Now, I don't think that's happened. I think it's considered to be a stick, which hasn't led to the kind of carrot and the nice outcomes around open access that we want. So maybe there's a world in which some kind of stick-based approach to the kind of things that we're trying to explore in the hidden REF might produce a sense that people would only do it because they feel they have to, not because they want the wider research culture benefits. So I totally agree with you, Gemma. Like, guidance can only change culture so far when it is going beyond merely a set of options.
Yeah.
But then we do have an example there with open access that I don't think we've really reaped the benefits sort of 5-6 years later, but people would have been thinking about this way earlier, right? So like a decade later, I don't think we've really reaped the benefits of that being a genuine research culture change. It feels a bit like an annoying thing we have to do.
Yeah, but James, the thing is that this, you say carrot and stick, and yes, the open access mandate was a stick. I agree with you there. But right now there's no carrot. So we're enabling you to make the choice, but what is in it for the universities? And the universities are going, what is in it for me? All they can see at the moment is a huge amount of work about sharing that link. There is no carrot. And I think that's where the Hidden REF and the ETI project can really, really start offering the carrot. Because again, if we show that these non-traditionally submitted outputs can be evaluated fairly and perhaps even advantageously in that fairness than they otherwise would be, that is a step towards providing the carrot. But Research England has just opened the door, but nothing else.
So maybe that's the point. But I do think the carrot here is if we can get this right, if we start recognizing NTOs, we'll advance research. And if you advance research, it doesn't matter what you're counting. No, you should do better in the REF. Making that case unarguable is why we're doing this. I also will say that, whenever it comes, I'm quite in favor of the stick occasionally. I always sit in meetings and people say, oh, well, when we're talking about sticks and not carrots here. And I'm like, no, get the stick. Occasionally it is needed to shift things on so that we have the right environment in which research can flourish.
Yeah, but sticks can break, Simon.
Sticks. Well, you can get another stick. So talking about institutional change, though, that is one of the things we want to do today, because I would like to talk about the NTO workshops. So we trailed it during the last podcast. Basically, if I just want to give a couple of seconds about what these are, and we've decided, and we're talking about it right now, one of the issues we get with trying to get not traditionally submitted outputs submitted to the ref is that people say, well, I don't know how to assess them within my institution, so how can I know which ones are the good ones to send through into the submission? So what we've done is we've put together a workshop. We were asked to do this by a number of different universities, where we come to your university and we give you access to not traditionally submitted outputs, and we get you to assess them. We talk through how that's done, and it's been really interesting. So we have we trialed it at King's, and then we sort of ran the first sort of large scale workshop at Liverpool, and we've got an excellent interview with the person who was leading it at Liverpool. So that's Natalie Wallis, and maybe we should take a listen to that. So hi, Natalie. Welcome to What the Ref.
Hi, everyone.
So I think we're just going to start off with the question that we're asking all of our guests, and that is, what is the ref to you, and why do we have the ref?
So first thing that springs to mind in simple terms is that the ref is the assessment method used by Research England to determine the funding allocation to UK research institutions. But to me, more personally, I see ref as the kind of the leverage that I use when I want to get senior buy-in for initiatives or activities, because it is so important to university finances, but also to individual researchers. And what's, I guess, a big thing for me and my team is that ref is a big part of why we exist. Our team, the outputs development team, supports the development of research outputs. And although our work goes well beyond ref, one of the reasons we exist from a strategic perspective is because of ref.
So actually, that leads us quite well into what's happening in Liverpool, because the reason that we sort of got to know each other and then ended up working together was because Liverpool's been really quite forward-thinking on NTOs, that's not traditionally submitted outputs. So can you tell me a bit about the NTO working group at Liverpool and the thinking behind it?
Yeah, of course. So we're doing lots of work around NTOs, or diverse output types, as we tend to call them now. And I think the most important thing is why, I guess. And we're doing that to make sure that we have equitable recognition of all research activities and outputs across career stages and across disciplines as well. But beyond equity, we also see the research excellence in the diverse research outputs. I think certain research fields or certain forms of research are much better suited to these diverse output types than they are journal articles, books, or those traditional so-called outputs.
So we probably should touch on the name, because again, this is another name, diverse output types, or DOTs, I think you call them.
Yeah.
That's so we had quite a bit of a previous podcast episode talking about whether what name we call these outputs, and not traditionally submitted outputs is the name that we've landed on. You've got DOTs, diverse outputs is used by the ref, but we're talking about the same things. It's outputs that aren't the traditionally submitted versions of journal publications, bits of books, and things along those lines. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And we did originally call you mentioned about the working group, we kind of call it the advisory panel that we have here. We originally called it the NTO advisory panel, and now we've renamed it to the DOT advisory panel. Hopefully we don't have to change it too many times, but we talked about the same thing.
Yeah, we've already had one change of name. We don't need any more. So how's the advisory panel being received across the university? Sort of what's the general sort of feeling across the academics and also the professional services staff?
Yeah, good. Thus far, we've had limited engagement with it because we're trying something completely new. So far it's work that specific researchers or academics get in touch with us, and then we put them in touch with an advisory panel member, and that's to get advice on a specific output type, a non-traditionally submitted output type that they want some support or help with. Those on the panel have really enjoyed it so far when they give advice, but we haven't had as much engagement as we originally hoped. And that's partially down to comms and engagement, but also because of the hesitance that still exists around these non-traditionally submitted outputs.
Do you think there's quite a reasonable amount of awareness raising to be done as well? Because so certainly when we tour around the country talking about NTOs, the first sort of step is just telling people that there's a vast array of different output types that you can submit to the ref, and that comes as news to people. Are you getting the same experience in Liverpool?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when people say to me, did you know for the new Ref 2029 that you can submit a whole range of output types? And I'm like, no, you also could for 2021. People just didn't talk about it so much. But strategically for our team, plans for Ref 2029 are really getting hot now. It's really stepping up. And we're using that as leverage for our team and the support and to open these conversations. But for the advisory panel specifically, we're also considering how they can be involved in potentially the internal assessment of diverse output types that others don't really feel comfortable in assessing, which of course was relevant to the workshop that we ran, Simon.
Of course, yeah, and we will get onto that because that was an absolutely fantastic day up in Liverpool that I'd really like to get into because it's one of the offerings that we'll be making to universities across the country. But first of all, I'm really interested in just the adoption of these sort of views, these new views on NTOs. So when you have somebody working with one of your advisory panel members, what happens? What's the sort of interaction? Is it just getting them to understand how they'll be assessed, or is it help them put together a pitch to include them in the next ref? I mean, what's the goals and how does it work?
Yeah, so it's a mixed bag. Thus far, it's primarily been how they improve and develop them. So very focused on the development of these outputs as opposed to the assessment. However, that is where we think we're going to go. Each request has been really unique, and it's also quite discipline specific because, as you know, certain disciplines it's more common to have certain types like exhibitions and translations in humanities and social sciences, and then data sets and softwares across health and life sciences. So it's been different for that and really mixed questions. And again, we're experimenting. So the advisory panel is kind of ever changing and we're still figuring out how it's going to work in reality.
I think we're breaking new ground here. So if anybody expects us or indeed anybody who's working in this space to come up with a lot of the answers directly, I think they're going to be disappointed because we really are trying to work out how to assess these outputs, how to include them in the ref submission, and then even more importantly, how to include them in the way that we measure success within institutions as well. So that's where we can really make a change on local institutional policy. So on that front, do you see this work changing your sort of the research strategy or the university strategy in Liverpool? Is it starting to have some effects?
Yeah, I think so. So I think it'll be positive for the university, definitely, not only for ref and the outputs, the CKU part of ref, but also for research culture and establishing that thriving research environment. Because if research staff feel that their research and the full breadth of outputs is being appreciated and valued, that can only be a positive thing. And then from a strategy perspective, I think it will drive new ideas for my team, but also new ideas for how research groups look at their outputs plans, look at the dissemination of their outputs if we do change this culture around diverse research outputs. So although maybe I'm a little bit biased, I do think it's kind of positive across the board, and I'm driving an institutional strategy plan around outputs and publications, and I'm keen to ensure that all research outputs are recognised within that for the institutional strategy going forward.
Well, if you have a positive bias about NTOs, you're in absolutely the right place right now on this podcast. So that's great. So we ran a workshop together, a not traditionally submitted outputs or diverse output types workshop, whichever way you want to take that one. About 3 weeks ago now. And we used we trialed the workshop at King's, and then Liverpool was the first time we really sort of set out the stall and said, come and we'll teach you how to assess not traditionally submitted outputs. So how did you find it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was so happy, and I think you mentioned this in the last podcast, that people turned up on the day and came. We all know it's notoriously difficult to engage staff across universities and get them to turn up to free events. But we had 60 to 70 research staff, a mix of academics and also professional services staff there, which was fantastic. And they stayed for the full 3 hours. I think it was important to start the conversations. It certainly hasn't given us all the answers. It's probably raised more questions, but important step forward, I think, for us.
So I think for me, there were two really big sort of wins for us. For one of which was we sold, 80 tickets, I think, and we had 60 to 70 people turn up. Now, it's terrible that the bar nowadays for running a successful workshop is people turned up. Yeah. But that is very much the world we're living in when it comes to free events on campus. But so I wasn't expecting so many people to be there, and I was a bit sort of taken aback because I was rapidly changing the way we were going to do things on the fly because we had a lot more people than I thought we would have. I mean, we ended up booking 3 extra rooms on the day.
Yeah, because it was so noisy in there.
It was, very noisy. So what we needed was far more space, it turned out, for potential future workshops. The other thing that I thought was interesting was when I do my sort of standard talk about, this is the history of not traditionally submitted outputs being submitted to the ref. I did my normal sort of national stuff, but then I put in a slide like, this was the case in Liverpool in the 2021 ref. And as I put that up, there was an intake of breath across the room. And I thought, that's success right there. Yeah. As people went, woof, that's fewer outputs than I thought. So I think that just that initial sort of starting the conversation is really, really important. And we gave them a bit of experience of assessment as well. But what happens next? Where can we take this and where will you take it in Liverpool?
Yeah, loads of ways. I think one of the key things for me that comes to mind from the workshop specifically, so not, I guess, what we're doing next, but again, back to the workshop, is the kind of disconnect or the difference between the hidden refs approach and the ref 2021 approach, because it was of course a workshop focused on assessment of these diverse output types, and we used submissions to the hidden ref competition. And one of the things that came out from most groups after doing that was they found it quite different to how they will actually be assessed in the ref, which of course we kind of knew that was the case because they are quite different. They didn't have the 300-word statement limits, and they didn't have the same information or context as they did in the official ref. And nearly every team said that they felt the individuals submitting these diverse output types, presented it more as an impact case study than they did as a research output in itself. And it's not surprising because historically these unrecognized, these hidden outputs have generally only formed part of impact case studies. They haven't been recognized in research outputs. So it shows even the academics themselves who are creating and submitting these don't really recognize them as outputs in themselves, or can't articulate the originality, significance, and rigor as they would maybe naturally for a paper or a book.
Yeah. So I think one of the key things for us coming out of that was, in the past, the hidden ref competition, which takes place next year, has always been, it's a very low barrier to entry because we just want to get people submitting their outputs and raising awareness so that we can raise awareness of those outputs and those vital people who are conducting the work to generate the outputs. And I think from now on in, we'll start to see the hidden ref competition as a way of trialing some of this work. So we'll start to apply more ref-like restrictions on the kind of outputs that we're expecting. So we'll want a better definition of originality and significance and rigor. So, and that will give us even better outputs to feed into future NTO workshops. So do you think you'll be running NTO workshops yourself? We're talking about sort of handing over the model to you so you can run them in Liverpool yourself. What are the plans on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the pulls of getting people there on the day was having you there, having kind of a representative from the Hidden Ref who have just received funding from Research England or just recently. Whether I have as much pull is a question in itself. Hopefully I do. And other teams who attended on the day have asked me to run subsequent events. So for example, our LMG, our library, museum and galleries team want to run, a similar NTO focused event, both around what NTOs are and also how to assess them. So that's really positive. And I guess that kind of leads on to the what's next for Liverpool. We're also running a funding competition, so I don't think you mentioned it in the last podcast. So another experiment from our team is that we've opened up a funding pot, basically just up to £2,000 for individuals to apply for money to support the development of one of their diverse outputs. Again, very much a trial, and we'll see how it goes, but we've already got lots of interest. So yeah, lots more. I'm gonna run loads more related events, I think. Whether it's the exact same as Simon's, I don't know if I have the ability and the pull, but we'll see.
Well, I think you absolutely have the draw, and the reason why is that I think that everything we've done with not traditionally submitted outputs so far has been really popular, and I think that just shows that the research community is really keen to engage and have their work, the full breadth of their work, recognised not just by the REF but also by their local institutions. So I think you'll see these events being popular in the future, absolutely. So I had a final question for you, really, which was, obviously you're doing some real trailblazing work at Liverpool, and there'll be lots of people in your position in universities across the country. And what advice would you give to them to get started with NTOs, DOTs, or whatever they want to call them?
Feel free to reach out to me and chat one-to-one if you wanted. But I think the most important thing is just try new things. If no one's doing work in this space at your institution, it's a win-win situation. Either you try something and it doesn't work and you know not to try it again, or you try something that really adds value in a gap where there's nothing else. I'm very lucky that our team exists and we have a lot of freedom to try new things. That's a culture that we have at Liverpool, luckily, and I know not everyone has that same freedom, but carry on mentioning it at all the different forums that you can. I know that's what my boss had to do for several years to get our team to exist. So carry on pushing, carry on starting the conversations, and not only internally but externally as well.
That's fantastic advice. So just really all that's left to say is to say thank you for coming on the podcast, and I wish you all the good luck with your endeavours in the future.
Thank you so much, Simon.
So I think that was a fantastic interview. I'm really, really happy that Natalie came on and talked about her experiences.
Yeah, she was amazing. I'm so glad that it was so well received. And, one of the things that the Hidden Ref has done separately to the ETI project, of course, but in relation to the ETI project, is evaluating non-traditionally submitted output since our first competition in 2020. And I think we can probably reasonably say now that the Hidden Ref has more experience evaluating non-traditional submitted outputs than the REF itself. So we have a lot to offer. And this, I'm hoping, is one of many, many, many exciting workshops that we will do around the country. Please sign up if you're interested, but also at the Hidden Ref Festival. And James, do you want to bring us up to date with what's happening at the Hidden Ref Festival first?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really exciting that people are coming to these events and we're getting loads of requests to do them, which is great. We will effectively be using a good chunk of the first day of the Hidden Ref, or Festival of the Hidden Ref, I guess we should call it, on 7th to 8th of October to do similar kinds of evaluation work around non-traditionally submitted outputs. So tickets are now sold out, unfortunately. But, it's a few months away, so we've got a wait list. So if you still, if you decide you want to come but haven't got a ticket, please do add yourself to the wait list, and we'll release those as soon as we can when people drop out, because inevitably there'll be some people who a few months ahead realize they can't come. So
okay, so looking back at the interview, I have to say my abiding memory of that workshop in Liverpool was where one of the groups we were working with, we were doing feedback, and one of them said, I always thought this would be difficult, but actually when you sit down and you start looking at the different kinds of submissions you get, it's not so hard to actually compare them and try and understand their value. And I just thought, fantastic. That's exactly what this workshop's all about. We talk about a bit about, just the awareness raising part of the workshop in the interview. But I was wondering, what did you think? What thoughts did it raise in your minds?
So on that point, Simon, I think it's a simple point, right? But I really like the part of the interview where Natty kind of raised this point around, raising awareness is the kind of the starting point for all of this. And one of the things that really struck me is when she mentioned, for example, that raising awareness that you could, a non-traditionally submitted output, as we call them, could be submitted to the next ref was a possibility. Was something that were people going, oh, right, that sounds like a new thing. And she's like going, no, this has been possible before, right? But it's just that we weren't aware. So there's just for something very simple, I think, about the work that a number of colleagues across the sector are trying to do at the moment, just to raise awareness of the possibility being this starting point from which all the good stuff that's in there around institutional change and research culture change is going to flow, right?
And let's be really clear there as well. She said in the last ref, but also in the ref before that, and the research assessment exercise in 2008, the output categories were exactly the same. So it's been since 2008.
I don't think we can underestimate the power of people having more awareness of what their research value can be construed through. And when we talk about, portability being taken away from individual researchers, but at the same time, the awareness that there are more ways in which they can demonstrate their excellence by, submitting and recognizing a diversity of output types, or DOTs, as she says, is really quite powerful. So I'm wondering whether the loss of portability on one hand is going to equalize with the increased awareness about diverse output types and non-traditionally submitted outputs and how open the ref is to their submission for 2029.
We need to get somebody on, don't we, to talk about
portability. We do need to get someone on.
We're going to have to focus. We'll focus a future episode on portability, I reckon.
There's a related point to that as well, which is about where non-traditionally submitted outputs are within the mindsets of researchers, right? Which is that there was that point in the interview where she talks about the fact that people just instinctively connect them to impact. And, trying to break that mindset is going to be challenging. Try and break the mindset towards thinking they can be things of originality, significance, and rigor. Even if people kind of know that they can be, just breaking that mentality around that's how the ref works is going to be a really important part of this process as well.
And I think they also connect that with the removal of the 2-star minimum for underpinning research outputs for impact case studies. And they were like, okay, well, then I can include other things. Because again, whereas previously they had to anchor that on an assumption of whether this is 2-star and above or not. Now they don't. And I'm very, very concerned, but at the same time excited to see that perhaps, they will see that as, all right, diverse outputs therefore go in impact case studies, but they don't go in CKUs. So submissions. So I'm really interested to see what will happen there. What struck me about the interview with Natalie is the way that she said that she uses the ref as a tool to leverage change and in a way power within a university system, which, as we know, because we work in universities, are quite dysfunctional organizations in one way or another. But the ref is a really important tool there. And as evidence of that, we've been talking about NTOs, or non-traditionally submitted outputs, for years now, since, we started the hidden ref 6-7 years ago, or however it was before. And yet she has adopted, perhaps for, in order to leverage that change that she needs in an organization, she's adopted the Ref 2029, rhetoric around diversity of outputs. And so she talked about diverse output types, or DOTs, rather than NTOs, or non-traditionally submitted outputs. And I think we should be proud about that. We're not owning NTOs, we're not owning their idea, but I'm really excited that people are using the concept as the same thing, but they're changing its word in order to, drive real change in otherwise, very conservative, very resistant to change organizations such as universities.
So, well, yes, I guess that's a good point. It's, would a non-traditionally submitted output smell as sweet by any other name? So the thing that really sort of occurred to me when I was talking to Natalie was, now where does this go next? And obviously for us, we want to be running NTO workshops at other universities because we want to go out and spread the word. But it's not going to be enough to run a single workshop. And Natalie and I have been talking about running more workshops in Liverpool, and then she'll take over the running of the workshops with her team. And I think that's a real key bit. So we can train people within universities to run these workshops, and then they'll start taking over and running them themselves. I don't know. What do you think about that sort of train the trainer model?
I love it. I love it. I think that we're only 3, and the Hidden Ref Committee is still limited in number, and we have, full-time jobs as well and all the rest of it. So this is a really way of, spreading the word, and, getting people on board and embracing our wider Hidden Ref community. I think it's a great idea. What do you think, James?
Well, I guess that what's interesting in the Liverpool example is that they're building on a bunch of foundations that exist, right? So they've already got a kind of panel of people in place who are primed to support people who are thinking of creating non-traditionally submitted outputs and doing them in ways that might be refable, and so they get some support. They've got a fund. I mean, a diverse output development fund. I kind of love that because, hey, and it aligns really nicely with like how I see things like funds that exist within universities just to say support impact development, right? So they're building on a strong set of foundations where I can see how that kind of train the trainer model would work. I guess what we need to learn about is the different kind of institutional models that exist or preparedness for this kind of stuff, because it may well be if we kind of go around saying, hey, we're doing train the trainer, some places be like, yeah, we're ready. And some places be like, we're not quite ready institutionally. We might need something else. So I think, we need to be going there. These workshops are great. We'll be doing them at the festival. I'm sure there'll be more demand, but I'm sure there'll also be demand for like slightly different models of doing this, maybe within subsections of institutions as well.
However, can I just say that fund is really interesting because it's like University of Liverpool's provided the carrot for researchers, but it's on the assumption that researchers in their like natural non-ref state are not producing diverse output types in the first place, that somehow, we need to push them towards diverse output types. And in that way, the university might see the carrot being a return on the investment that they have on this fund to encourage diverse output types. But we saw it with our conversations that we're having at the University of Bath, is that you ask researcher, do you do non-traditionally submitted outputs? And they will immediately say no, without actually understanding what a non-traditionally submitted output is, without awareness of what those types are, and therefore submittable to the ref, but not. So again, it's the question of there are already universities that do not have DOT funds. I love this. They can go dotty if they want, but like DOT funds, where researchers are still producing non-traditionally submitted outputs or DOTs, but are not aware of their value to the ref. And more so is that they're not aware that this is normal. The research officers are not aware that these are normal. So when they ask, do you do non-traditionally submitted outputs, they either think about it in terms of impact case studies, as we previously said, or they say no because they're not aware about what the concept means. So I think when research officers are going out and they're saying, do we need this workshop, yes or no? And they think, no, we don't need this workshop because we don't produce non-traditionally submitted outputs, then perhaps they should really reflect on how they're asking the question and what that means. And from Natalie's interview, I think it's very clear that there's benefits in just raising the awareness that these output types are allowable. And then you can ask the question, but only after people know what the concept means.
So I think the awareness raising part is just such a fundamentally important part of the success of this work that we're doing and the NTO workshops in particular. And so I did want to add one other thing that came back from that workshop, and it really struck me, and we discussed it again in the interview, was the necessity to change next year's competition. So Hidden Ref competition in 2026, next year's.
26, yeah.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow.
Addition is still not a particularly strong point for this physicist. So for next year's competition, we need to change the submission criteria so they start to reflect what's required by the ref, so that people actually get practice of doing this. Our assessors get practice, and we generate more outputs that look more like a ref output to be used in these workshops.
Do you know what I would really like to do? I would like to do from this podcast right now, do a call out to all computer scientists who would otherwise be submitted in the unit of assessment for computer science, who has never in the history of the RAE or the history of the ref submitted a piece of software or data to be assessed as part of an outputs criterion. I'd like to do a call out to all computer scientists to submit their software, to submit their data to next year's Hidden Ref, so that we can recognize the broadness of your discipline and how it communicates its findings within and beyond academia. So call out to computer scientists. We're expecting big things from you next year in Hidden Ref Festival.
There's a correction there, though, Gemma. There's a correction, because I did the analysis after you talked about it in a previous podcast. I looked, And it's not right. Computer science did submit software outputs. Out of 186,000 outputs submitted to the last ref, 2 were submitted into the computer science category. So maybe it's not representative of that very heavily based software.
We need more.
Industry.
I think the power of computer science, and the power of AI, and everything that everybody's talking about, exciting supercomputers, blah blah. I think that 2 out of 180,000 is pretty much zero. And I think even a statistician might actually agree with me that 2 divided by 180,000 is closer to 0 than it is to the 5% manifesto. That is the minimum we expect.
I mean, maybe one of Natalie's colleagues at Liverpool will take that kind of diverse output development fund and use it as I thought kind of she was intending it in a way, which is not necessarily to develop the output from the ground up, but to say, oh, okay, that data that I've got that's actually really important, I will do the work around it to make it kind of accessible. Because I guess that's the point about this, right? Which is that whether you're a computer scientist with a data set or a musician with a composition or a social scientist that has some kind of confidential report, it's not necessarily about the fact the thing exists or doesn't exist sometimes. It's about whether or not you feel confident that it's packaged in such a way it can be assessed. And so maybe that is what those funds will be used for by colleagues at things like Liverpool, which will be to make something lovely, submit it to the hidden ref, we give some feedback, and then maybe it'll end up in the final submission.
I do. Non-traditionally submitted outputs do need a portfolio put together. They're actually very, very cumbersome to put together, and we will be talking about that in future podcasts. But exactly, maybe they'll use that. But we'll have to do a follow-up with Natalie to see exactly how that fund was used and what they see as valuable in that.
So thank you, Gemma and James, for another fascinating chat about the things that have been going on with the ref. And thank you also to Natalie for coming on and telling us about the NTO workshop at Liverpool. You can get this podcast on YouTube, or in fact, any of the places that you normally would get your podcasts. If there's something you would like to raise or with us, or you'd like us to discuss, please do get in touch. That's wtref@hidden-ref.org. We might have a break over the summer. It depends what happens with scheduling. So if you're having a break over the summer, I hope you have a brilliant one. And with that, I'll say thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.